Have you ever seen a GoPro video of somebody on a roller coaster? And as you're watching the video and the person begins to ascend and go up the roller coaster, you build anticipation. When they get to the top and they descend and start picking up speed and they dip and they turn, you actually feel your stomach drop. It is as if you are actually on the roller coaster. That's because our brain doesn't know the difference between a lived experience and an imaginary experience. The cortisol builds up the same way, your heart starts racing, your pressure begins to build, your stomach begins to turn. All of the physiological and chemical responses mimic actually having the experience. Now, if you agree with me on this, then you'll agree that it's really important that when we talk about health, we talk about it holistically. And we don't just focus on nutrition and fitness, but also the health of the environment that we're in, our mental health, the people that we're around, and in fact, the things that we watch. My name is Mubaraka Ibrahim, and you may be familiar with me coming on and talking to you about nutrition and exercise, but today I want to talk directly to Black people, and I want to talk about our individual and collective mental health. When I watched The Birth of a Nation, I'm going to be honest with you. When I watched it and it was the story of Nat Turner, I have to say that I left the theater pretty angry. And if I have to be completely honest with you, I didn't want to be around white people for a couple of days. Now, I know consciously that all white people are not the same, and all white people then or now were not complicit in the atrocities that were placed on enslaved Africans. But it left me feeling some kind of way. And it was that experience that made me tell myself that I would never watch another slave movie again. Because I think that it affects us on a deeper level than we try to think or to claim. I think about this every time I see a slave movie being advertised to Black people. The constant replaying of extraordinary experiences that undoubtedly affect African Americans much more visceral because we are descendants of these enslaved people. And this is showing the actual trauma and the retelling of the experiences of our ancestors. It's reliving the mental oppression, the physical abuse, the sexual trauma that our great-grandparents and even our grandparents experienced. And it triggers physiological and emotional states that honestly handicaps us. We talk about epigenetics in Black people and the expressions of genes that can be turned on by experiences in the environment. And this holds true. And it's been proven by science. There's a study at Emory State University in Atlanta, Georgia. And in this study, they took mice and they exposed them to a chemical that is similar to what that smelled in cherries and almonds. And they exposed them to this chemical smell and gave them an electrical shock. Right? So the mice became afraid and they showed signs of fear every time they smelled this chemical, even when the electrical shock wasn't present. Okay, this is conditioning and it was very expected. The unexpected part was the children of those mice actually showed fear of this same smell even though they were never exposed to the trauma. To take it even further, the grandchildren of those mice who were exposed to the original trauma shuddered at the smell of almonds and cherries, the same chemical that's in almonds and cherries. Now, to take away the factor of nurture, right, that they're being taught this fear, they found that mice that were conceived via in vitro fertilization from the male also showed the fear, showing that this trauma was passed down not from one generation, but through two generations. Now, if we know that human epigenetic response, and science tells us this, works the same way, How do you think re-traumatizing every generation of Black people with the atrocities of slavery affects the Black community? If we know that epigenetics consists of genes that can be switched on and off through emotional and environmental trauma and passed down through generations, why do we constantly expose ourselves voluntarily to be re-traumatized through slave movies? When we're constantly reminded that we were enslaved, it creates a mindset of struggle. It creates limited beliefs that we are constrained by that which white people and the American government allows us to have. I believe that it subconsciously limits not just our belief of what we can achieve, but the definition of what success is. Now, I'm not saying that the truth of slavery should not be told. I think white Americans in particular need to watch it, they need to hear it, they need to understand it, they need to understand its effects on the American economy and society and the education system and the political system. White Americans need to be told and retold the trauma of slavery. But Black people, not so much. Can you imagine a world where Black kids understood that slavery was the interruption of their history and not the inauguration of it? Can you imagine the dreams of Black people who thought that success was a right instead of a privilege? People who dream their own wildest dream instead of trying to become the wildest dream of their enslaved ancestors. What would the Black community become? Can you imagine? Now, I think that it's important that we know our history, but I contend that we maintain an 80-20 rule. Don't spend more than 20% of our energy reliving the violence and oppression and focusing on microaggressions and trauma, but spend 80% of our energy focused towards living your wildest dream, achieving your biggest dreams of success, going for a future that is determined by what you are focused on. Because everything that you achieve is about where you place your focus. And if you're placing your focus on the traumas of the past, then we are doomed to repeat it. That's my thoughts for you today. Stay focused and achieve success.